Introduction. Spot the signs of cartoon trafficking. Report any suspicious behaviors to a local ministry branch or nearest central constabulary as soon as possible. Your anonymity will be protected. Remember, if you spot animals, casting children away from civilization or crowds of supplied refugees hanging around cars from dawn till dusk. Shifty characters promising young and old riches and power. Any animal that has no business otherwise talking is giving a speech to young groups of people and simultaneously arming them with weapons. Know the signs. Stop fairies dead before they spray. Be advised on what you will expect to find if a fairy has infiltrated your home. 1. Talking animals are learning complex human behaviors at an accelerated pace. 2. Spider with propaganda. 3. Fine layer of silicone. Silver and gold dust appears nightly despite being clean. 4. Farm animals are found to have escaped and are wearing the garments of the upper-class valet. 5. Strange animal-plant hybrid vehicle tracks are found to be peeling out from your lawn in the middle of the night. Warning. Any sign of small rounded miniature or horn-carrying humanoid should be reported at once. If you find yourself up against a fairy, it is important to know that all the fairy are named callers and predisposed to causing trouble. Please do not antagonize them. Instead, it is vital that you do not even acknowledge their existence. Do not accept gifts from a fairy for your newborn or for weddings or funerals. Do not attempt to taunt or gaslight a fairy, and if asked to return to their realm, you must find any excuse not to go. For more tips and tricks regarding methods of fairy population control, please visit the Helsing Library.
Chapter 1. Edgar of the Opera. Author's note. Paris in the 1910s is considered the height of France's golden age that saw rich art and architecture as well as social life, and it would reach a strange biblical-like climax when an extra seasonal rain flooded a lower region of that side of France, causing countless basements and underground passage ways to become small lakes beneath so many structures. It's during this historical rainstorm that we find the familiar cast of the movie The Aristocats, including Adley, her butler Edgar, George the lawyer, and her family of cats. As a quick brief synopsis, the butler did it. Edgar drugged the cats and spirited them away during the storm. In an epic return adventure with an adult male cat O'Malley, the end of that movie would end up with the cats locking the butler in the chest, after wrapping him in chains, cracking several ribs. And after mercifully putting a bucket onto his head, it appears a horse kicks that bucket, the result of which instantly knocked the butler out. He was then placed in the chest that was originally supposed to contain the cats. No one argues that what Edgar did or was trying to wasn't greedy, however. The actions that concluded from the blunt force trauma combined with severe dehydration and malnutrition would have killed Edgar if it had not been for the butler's will to live that kept him tapping his swollen and trapped head inside a bucket against the chest. The crew that discovered him wanted to cut his throat for stowing away, but Edgar managed to weasel his way to be of help till the next time they made land in Calcutta. What journeys awaited him there was what brought Edgar to the ministry's attention. All of those operations are still highly classified, but the prodigal butler has agreed to let those records be made public when he passes away. But I'm sure the guys at Security Division will still have to clear it, even if Archive complies with those instructions. Digressing, Edgar returned to Paris eventually, but by then Adley had long been dead. Much of the mansion's furnishings had been washed outdoors. There was a clause in the old woman's will regarding her dying wishes to let her house be overrun with a specific gang of well-known alley cats. But Scat Cat and his gang were not open to sharing what they considered their territory since O'Malley had left again. Scat Cat had killed the oldest kittens, but Duchess having accidentally fell into a well. The household had spiraled out of control. Marie is the only surviving kitten, and she is the one who tells the story that we are familiar with. However, once his head injuries subsided, the persistent butler with his memory returned eventually disclosed one secret his employer had been keeping for years. I managed to find Edgar, who told me in an interview Adelaide was the most famous opera star in all of Paris for dozens of years. People loved her and gathered to support her during her performances, said the aged man who sat across from me at the table in the Justice Punishment Ministry cafeteria. Edgar worked for the ministry at the time as a consultant for Punishment Corps. And all of her wealth and prestige was supposed to be a result of her abilities as a singer? Of course, that was only her cover. Edgar admits that he had enabled his employer's every whim once her husband had passed away. Oh well, that was all nonsense, you see, because we had been stealing trinkets from the opera goers, yes, and we had acquired too much too quickly, so we tried to make investments here and there. Edgar pauses and looks thoughtfully into space, somewhere behind my head, and then continues. We stole things to the point of not having enough space to keep our hoard, said the former butler. And wouldn't you know it, old chap, all that hard work and risking our necks came to hardly anything, at least for me. The humble butler who paid the little thieves to snatch the jewelry from the patrons. And that money, mind you, I paid from my own personal account. Edgar stops again and then takes a sip of tea. Stocks, bonds, the mansion, the cart, the horse, everything. He continued, all bought through the larceny, and maybe some funds from a deli would be used to keep the police off our case occasionally. although he has never expressed direct desire to reveal all his secrets to the public. I managed to convince him to let one of the many concealed realities that Edgar holds onto to be published nearly 10 years after the events portrayed in the movie. Yes, it is time to tell at least one of those secrets. Edgar seems to snap himself out of falling asleep and then continues, "Oh, and George, her lawyer, poor man, he was the last friend Adley, and his passing was probably what brought the madame to the point of madness, letting all those old cats of Paris live with her. Unthinkable. That mansion was..." Edgar shakes his head motions with his hands as to brush the bad thoughts away. "And here I am, the lone survivor after all this time, through no real claim to all that money. But what good would it do me now? In so old, my dear boy, do you know that the Phantom of the Opera was a real thing that happened? Indeed, yes, another secret for your book, I should think. And of course the story is nonsense except to the water. Ways beneath the Opera House." At least Edgar went on to describe that all the action you see in the movie had occurred in Paris, and the flooding at the time ruined homes everywhere, furniture was washed away. People and pets were displaced. I never met the Phantom. Edgar chuckles, but we had contraptions built to make our acquisitions that much easier. I dare say, if her voice had not prevented her from continuing her performances, both of us would be richer than the King of Spain. Oh dear me, I suppose might as well have been able to buy Spain for that rate because of his arrival back to Paris after his employer's passing. Edgar refused to go near abandoned home that had been taken over by cats. I tried. I made it up to the stables when the smell... Oh gracious me, the smell made me lurch. I won't go into that place for any amount of stolen money, Edgar says, and then slaps his knee. How about that old boy? The old butler who used to be the hated villain has become the last man standing after all. Before I left Edgar to his lunch, I asked him if he had learned of what become of Duchess and her kittens. "Oh, yes. Well, if you watch the movie, you'll notice that at every chance I have to destroy those cats, I not only do not do it, but go out of my way to find an alternative instead of killing them." I actually was fond of Duchess. She had been just a kitten when we found her outside the Opera House. Adelaide picked her up from amongst the thick snowfall. Poor thing was half dead, but we brought her back, and she became part of the family. If anything, it was her little runts that gave me a headache, but I, of course, still cared for them, as I would have Duchess when she was a half-dead ball of freezing outside. I was heartbroken to hear that she had drowned. I thanked Edgar for his time, and he laughed with a twinkle in his eye as we parted ways. I opened the cafeteria doors to leave. I could hear the old butler humming a song to himself. Everybody wants to be a cat. After note, Edgar left Justice Grimm after years of working with us as a consultant, and I understand his retirement has gone well enough. After he had the mansion demolished, he was able to start his own foundation, and today a veterinary clinic has been built and bears the name of Edgar Alphonse Roland Marquis. The cornerstone has been decorated with a brass engraving of Duchess and her 3 kittens. Further investigations would reveal that Adelaide, Edgar and George likely stolen about $60 million in jewelry and stolen goods, with about $50 million of that tied up in stocks and bonds. Edgar has to this day expressed no interest in acquiring a single coin of that money.
Chapter 2. Nature made killers, the prince and the king. As far as brains go, I got the lion's share. But when it comes to brute strength, no, I'm afraid I'm at the shallow end of the gene pool. Quote from Scar. Author's note. I have taken the opportunity in Chapter 2 to take the time to let someone else do the majority of the exposition. Namely, her name will remain redacted for security's sake. I was introduced to Dr. Redacted at a Justice Police ball. I had never been to a ball before, and the disappointment it came with made me wish I had never even considered going, let alone go in the first place. And if Dr. Redacted hadn't given me the puppy dog eyes when I originally coughed at her suggestion that we return next year together and do research for the book, I never would have gone again. Damn those puppy eyes and that quiver of a lip. It breaks the resolve of me and the most well-conditioned officers or agents currently employed by Justice Grimm. On this occasion, I made the mistake of instantly trying to imitate the puppy dog look, and thanks to the picture she took, I could see how ridiculous it was. I don't know if she purposely used puppy dog eyes protocol to force me to make the face, or if she genuinely didn't want to go alone to the ball. What kind of gentleman would I be to say no a second time? I can't think of anyone besides Dr. Redacted who can simultaneously give me a hard time about everything and also manage to insult my intelligence, my department, my tan, and our volleyball rotation roster. You could say I owed it to her, plus there was always a chance she would invite me back to her apartment where I planned to steal her parking pass for later. She came dolled up as any psychiatrist working with the fairy tale scum for a secretive, clandestine, extracurricular, justice, dispensary, and punishment corps, that is to say, decked to the halls with eye-popping holly, redacted. All of that nonsense aside, I did enjoy her company, even if the ball was more like upper-class speed dating with corsets and wigs. I saw men wearing makeup and had high heels, while women appeared in armor more or less and wore matching medieval boots beneath carousel skirts that would not even allow enough proximity for a peck on the cheek, let alone of heavy petting. It was in this atmosphere that good doctor and I were sitting at a table in the corner when she recalled the story that she had been reading up on. She had been to Africa many times. Her work there with hyenas was hilarious. Well, that's the impression we all got from them. She used to give us all the lectures about how there is nothing in Africa but AIDS and lions. However, when the first photos of two lions with no manes surfaced, her attention fell upon two familiar faces. Below, I have recounted how she told me about the file's contents.
It was Simba. That's right. Simba, and that other male lion from the sequel. And when I saw them, I was like, no freaking way, so I had to read on. I mean, who wouldn't? This was the continuation of a golden story, or at least that's what I fooled myself into believing till the file name clued me in straight away. The King and the Prince, and the second photo showed a train station with Val Kilmer and Michael Douglas holding an elephant gun at a feral-looking Simba. I think you, of all people, know how easily photos are fabricated, and I brushed off that initial shock for a bad joke. The file opened with a gruesome play-by-play of Simba and his ward methodically hunting humans, and had how they had compiled a body count of 144 kills. I had to charge through like 5 entire pages of victim, details, and even some interesting amateur autopsies and what they found, but I got to the back of the report near the end of the file, and by that time, I was ready to skip my lunch break. Union rules be damned, it saved my life, but I digress. So when we last saw these two lions, there was a merger of the two prides into one by my reckoning. These were a part of Scar's offspring, and his females who had been deported at the end of the first movie were welcomed back to the Pride Rock. Any environmentalist would tell you that putting that kind of extra stress on the environment would lead to a dying off of the food source, and well, that pretty much is what happened. The combined prides may have seen past their differences, and indeed, as one, they must have all suffered together as the wildebeest vanished. They would resorted to eating their own cubs at some point before leaving Pride Rock for good. That exodus isn't too clearly described, but it's easy to say that they straight up just left one day, and it remains a wasteland. It explains why we never got that third movie, instead just got something else. The fate of Simba's pride is a perfect example of the old saying, pride comes before a fall. Well, either way, I went through the file. The lionesses had long discarded their loyalty to the king. It was only Simba and his son in La Kovu, who was the direct result of Scar's breeding program. It turned out Simba had embraced the dark side of his legacy, and the end result was the falling out of both lions' manes. And thanks to their little killing spree, they must have known that the humans would shoot them eventually in a way they were trying to leave in the flash of glory and blood and death. The fact that they both worked together with tactical insight was the most curious. The way I see it, Simba let his ward do the surveillance and even had his son-in-law act as bait to trap them alone over and over. Possibly Simba was trying to get rid of that runt by placing him in dangerous designs of their death traps, but because humans kept falling for them, Simba had to risk more dangerous attacks. The climax of those attacks occurred at the train station in the movie, but it doesn't seem to add up with the file. Both lions had already been discovered to be dead before the station was even finished. Do you want to know how the file says they died? It wasn't by a bullet from Val Kilmer. Let's just say that the end of the former King of Pride Rocks was fitting. The attacks only stopped because an injured Kovu possibly was not able to survive Simba's pecking order attacks. He had always been able to before, but eventually Simba won out that fight. And according to what I read, Simba not only ate his son-in-law, but managed to wear the lion's hide like some cloak. But oh yes, the manner of Simba's death, you see, it all came together. Simba was found in a cave near the slaughter zone. The Lion King had been hit on the head so hard that his skull had caved in. Around the cave, there was a wooden stick with gourds tied to it. Do you know what that implies? Well, in case you need a little boost, the final entry in the file is accompanied by a photo of a baboon having hung himself with vines up in a massive tree that appeared to be a shaman hut. The short investigations brought several black magic ingredients to our attention. A crew of symbolists had been trying to understand the glyphs Rafiki had carved into the tree, but so far we have only made an educated guess that the baboon was skilled enough in some arcane form of voodoo and had possibly been controlling Simba through some kind of remote control spell likely administered when the baboon squirted gourd juice on the newborn prince. I'm even willing to bet that Scar had also been an earlier attempt at mind control. I mean, what if the scar on Scar's face was from that insufferable monkey? What do you think of that?
She stopped and gave me those puppy dog eyes. I smiled back and gave the best reply I could think of considering the situation. Oh well, it's the circle of life, I said, and she proceeded to punch me in the jaw. I'm not an expert in the mind of any particular woman, but my gut told me that tooth-splitting haymaker of hers was technically a sort of foreplay, so in my haste to respond to the social cue, I attempted an uppercut. She wasn't fast enough to dodge it, but somehow she embraced the punch and I found myself open, unguarded, and at a disadvantage to her advantage. A nearby chaperone saw our horseplay and darted over with a yardstick and then proceeded to beat us both out of the ball with it. Perfect timing, I would say, and so would she.